I liked all my family except my uncle. He made me uncomfortable because he was always touching me. One day, my cousin and I went to his house, even though I did not want to go. When we got there, my cousin and aunt went to the kitchen. Suddenly, my uncle grabbed me with all his strength and covered my mouth with his hands. When we got to a room upstairs, he pushed me onto the bed and told me not to say a word or he would kill me. I prayed that something would stop him, and I kicked and pushed him, but all my effort was hopeless. Then a miracle happened. My cousin came into the room and saw my uncle on top of me. She called my aunt, who then called the police and had my uncle arrested. I couldn't sleep for months, still knowing that he wasn't here anymore, but the fact that I knew I was about to get raped left me in shock. Now I'm going to classes that help me forget those tragic moments. Even though I am doing well in those classes, I know that the memory is always going to stay in my mind and haunt me for the rest of my life.
Ignoring the concerns of the youth causes violence. Be vocal.
Pow, pow, pow. There was an explosion of gunshots as my mother fell to the ground, dead. I had seen everything from the coat closet, where I was hiding to avoid taking a bath. No matter how much I wanted to scream and cry, I dared not to move. There were 3 tall men about the same age as my brother, Carlos, searching the house for something or somebody. Later that night, when Carlos came home, the men had left. He tried to calm me down and explain that he was a part of a gang and that the men were his gang members. Carlos had broken the gang law, and the men were not going to let anyone get in the way for their search of him. He dropped to his knees and told me not to tell a soul. I was horrified by his confession, so I ran up to my room and slammed the door. Late that night, before my father got home from his night shift, I heard cursing and foul language in the front yard. All of a sudden, I heard a familiar sound, pow, pow, pow. Through my bedroom window, I watched as my brother fell to the floor, dead. When I was sure they were gone, I ran outside, dragged my brother in the house, and begged his lifeless body for forgiveness. Without my brother and my mother, my life changed forever. Juggling elementary school and a new busy schedule, it was a struggle for me. My daddy had to work 2 jobs, and I had to take on the responsibilities of a mother at a very young age. I lived with the guilt that it was my fault they were killed.
Activity causes violence.
Be a leader.
One day in the 5th grade, one of my best friends, Mary, pulled me and our friend, Diana, aside to tell me that she was covered in bruises because her father abused her, her siblings, and her mother. She had no escape from the abuse. The mental trauma followed her everywhere. She told us that her dad was an alcoholic. She didn't want to report him to anyone because she didn't want her or her siblings to end up in foster homes. On the other hand, she couldn't take the abuse anymore. She told us of the beating the previous night with a board and 6 rusty nails sticking out of it. When she was finished, she made us swear not to tell anyone about what we had heard. Diana and I looked at each other and nodded. We stupidly agreed. The next week, we had a health program at school that focused on how to handle verbal and physical abuse. After the program, Diana and I persuaded Mary to tell the teacher. The next day, Mary wasn't there, or the next, or the next. In fact, she didn't come back until the last week of school. When she finally came back, she told us she was moving. Her father had been arrested, and her family had moved in with her aunt. She had to testify against her father, even though her grandmother was pressuring her to lie in court. That was the last day I saw Mary. I can't help but wonder if pressuring her to tell really did make things better, or if it just complicated her life even more. At least I know that I did what I could to help stop the abuse.
Keeping abuse a secret prolongs violence.
Be brave.
My dad drank a lot and would fight and argue with my mom. He was so bad he could never keep a job. The fighting left me so scared and nervous that I was always sick. I became so scared to be in front of people and would always want to be in my room. My mom was the only one working, and whatever money she had, my dad drank it out. There was a lot of time when we went without necessities because the beer came first. When the money was all gone, he began to pawn stuff so he could keep drinking. After being in and out of jail and getting 3 DWIs, he was sent to a treatment at a place called Safety. He served 1 year there and 1 year in jail. My mom took care of us by herself for 2 years. I can remember those were the hardest years of my life. Now my dad is different, and best of all, he is sober.
Alcohol and drug abuse cause violence.
Be in control.
In my neighborhood, there have been violent activities such as shootings, stabbings, and gang vandalism. There are vacant houses on every street in our community. Gangbangers use the houses as a hangout and mark the walls with graffiti. Teenagers lurk in the streets until near midnight when their curfews have passed. Children of all ages are drinking and smoking illegal substances. The environment I live in makes me feel like I have to be cautious at all times. Last summer at our community park during football practice, our coach shouted, "Everybody hit the ground." All of the players and the cheerleaders dropped face down on the ground. A 12th grade student, who was also a relative of one of our football players, had been shot multiple times. Some parents withdrew their kids because they were afraid this type of incident might happen again.
Negligent communities cause violence.
Be proactive.
I have witnessed violence since I was born. My father always came home drunk and would beat up my mother. When I was 3 or 4 years old, I stood up to my father's abuse. He was hitting my mother, and I got engaged and grabbed one of his beer bottles and busted it on his head to defend my mom. Ever since that violent day, my father and I fought endlessly until my mother took my brother, my sisters, and I from our home in Puerto Rico to America, and my mother got a divorce.
Abuse from parents fosters the cycle of violence.
Be the change.
I can't
Stop violence, but we can.